Bonjour à toutes et tous, vous écoutez First Print, votre podcast comics préféré pour une nouvelle émission au format SuperFriends. C'est l'émission qui va à la rencontre des personnes qui font vivre la culture comics par leur travail. On poursuit des interviews post-Angoulême avec pas mal d'artistes qui, après le FIBD, ont fait des tournées en France. Et aujourd'hui, on est ravis d'accueillir l'auteuresse Kay O'Neill, qui est éditée principalement, ou je crois même exclusivement, chez Bliss éditions, pour parler justement de ses œuvres comme la trilogie des Dragons-Thé ou La gardienne des Papillons, qui vient de sortir tout récemment. On est donc dans un univers de BD jeunesse, généralement très féerique, tourné vers la nature et la bienveillance, et on va pouvoir discuter de tout ça en anglais évidemment, mais il y aura une version retranscrite normalement sur Comicsblog.fr, ne vous inquiétez pas. Et une fois le générique passé, je vous laisse en compagnie de Kay. So that was the short introduction in French, but cool. It was only nice things. I promised it would be. So hello, Kay. It's really nice to have you here in our podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Also, I did not have to sign a lot of books during the last 2 weeks, so I guess I'm maybe better than you. I've got a first question because I think it's the first time you're in France.
Yes.
Yes, it is. So for people who might not know who you are, could you just introduce yourself a little bit? It's really the basic question I'm always starting with.
Sure. My name is Kay. I'm a graphic novelist, cartoonist, illustrator from New Zealand. All of my books so far are also in French now. Mostly they are for maybe between like 8 and 13 or so, but to be honest, people coming to the signings, all ages, children with their parents, adults with no children, lots of teenagers. So yeah, I hope they're for everybody.
So you've been living in New Zealand for your whole life.
Yes.
What's the comic book countryside there?
Really, it's pretty good for the size. We have a really strong community of people making comics, graphic novels. Obviously, the publishing side of things is smaller domestically. We don't have as many publishing houses that are like, we don't really have too many specializing in graphic novels, but people are often doing them as part of their maybe like university studies or as free time, or they might work as like an illustrator and cartoonist as well as making graphic novels. And recently we have a lot of people of making web comics and getting deals with American publishing houses. Yeah.
And you've been reading comic books also from the beginning?
Reading manga. I kind of started with manga first in a way. When I was younger, I wasn't really drawn to things like Tintin or other kind of strip cartoons and things. Like I knew about them, but they weren't something that I wanted to do. And then when I started reading manga when I was maybe 12 in the library, started to buy them, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is the storytelling that I really want to try.
What do you like so much about this kind of storytelling?
I think I liked first of all, like the dynamic layouts. I loved the balance between kind of drama and humor. I liked that contrast. The ones I read were always quite funny, but I think almost all manga have really good humor as well integrated, even if they're very serious and more like a sort of like a serious story. They'll still have those funny moments. But I just loved the art and the focus on like the characters, the interpersonal relationships, the dynamics, and the way that the characters truly felt like the focus. And I was also very into ones that were slice of life and just about everyday things.
So how do you go from being a comic reader, a manga reader, to a graphic novelist?
I think it's fairly I think because of I'd say with manga what it mainly inspired me was the idea that like comics could be anything, because there's manga about every topic. There's like fantasy, there's sci-fi, there's action, there's romance. So I didn't feel limited by any genre. So I think that opened me up to think, what kind of stories do I really want to tell? But I was not thinking about actually like getting published. I was just making them to put online, like as webcomics. So I think that also, again, you have that freedom. No one's forcing you to make, oh, you know, these comics are really popular right now, make this. It's like you really can think like what you want to make.
You didn't have any pressure?
I mean, I guess I knew what would, because I was posting online, it's like some things you get more feedback and other things you don't. So I guess I could gauge like, oh, people are interested in these princesses, or people are interested in these tea dragons. So it was nice to get that feedback and then be able to like develop those ideas. And people in France who have been coming to the book signings, there are people who are saying, I followed you on Tumblr back in 2016. I saw the first Princesse Princesse when you posted it.
Yes, because Tumblr doesn't exist anymore.
No, it does. It does. People are going back. Yeah. Okay. Everyone's returning.
It's not an archive already.
Not quite. No. It's a lot quieter, but yeah, it still exists.
So that's where you started posting pages on Tumblr?
Yes.
And at what point did you get noticed by a publisher? Because I guess the main goal was still to be published in physical form.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was the goal, but it was also like I had a job. And I was going to do that job as long as I needed to. It was kind of, I guess, I was pretty conflicted about making the transition to full-time artist, because, you know, I did one project where I was just the artist, and I didn't feel as satisfied with that. I knew I wanted to do the whole thing. Like it had to be my story. And, you know, obviously I'd say in the West, maybe there's like the graphic novels are sort of booming in the last like 5 years. But before that, there weren't many webcomics being published as books. It was considered as quite separate. So yeah, it was like the goal in the back of my mind, but it wasn't one that I thought was realistic, especially living in New Zealand.
Do you know what maybe changed in the maybe public perception of what webcomics are? Because like you said, like now there are many webcomics that are getting published, and we've been speaking with Ariel Rees that got through that way. I think maybe Wendy Shu also did webcomics. So and you know these artists. So what's your perception about the public change that happened in the last 5 years?
I think it's been on like a couple of fronts. I think one is that a lot of webcomics did Kickstarters that or like crowdfunding. I think France has a different website that they would use, but I think that was one aspect, was really, really successful crowdfunding campaigns to have printed books that showed there is huge demand. And in my personal case, it was that my editor, Ari Yarwood, who was at Oni Press, was looking for an LGBT book for children, like Princess, that's what Princesse Princesse. But it just makes sense. I don't know. I think maybe there was just a kind of more traditional mindset that, if something's online for free, people won't pay for it. But it's like, no, if they're fans, they will want to pay for it. They will want the copy, the physical copy as well. And so I think just they've realized that, you've already grown this organic audience that are really excited to then purchase the real, like the printed copy as well.
You mentioned that you were influenced a lot by manga and animation, and that is showing in your art. I guess you would say that Miyazaki is one of your influences, but what are the others?
I guess a lot of books that I read growing up, which was I really liked. I guess I read a lot of like older books, things like Little Women in English, like kind of almost like pre-technology kind of books. So I think that influences my work quite a lot as well as sort of like folk tales and just fantasy stories and things. Yeah.
And then you really like to draw like characters with like ears or animal parts.
Yeah.
It really seems to be a recurring thing in your books. Is it just like a signature for you, or?
It's kind of I think it's just fun to play with the designs. The ears are really expressive. It kind of depends on the setting as well, because like if I'm creating more of like a fantasy world and want to show that it is like fantasy clearly, and that there's lots of different people living in it. It's like a fun way to explore that. But if I want like an Aquacorn Cove, everyone is human except for the like magical creatures. So it just kind of depends on what I'm trying to portray. But I just find them really fun to draw.
What makes a good character design?
I guess when I can just draw them quickly and get the character, then which usually happens by the end of the book rather than the start. So yeah, usually at the end I can tell whether I've succeeded with that character or not.
But are you doing like a lot of tryouts when you're starting a new project?
Yeah, I always start with my sketchbooks rather than digital, paper, pen and paper, depending on the book. To be honest, every time I finish a project and then I go back and look at my sketchbooks, I'm surprised how much I forgot that I did all that, and that it took a long journey to actually settle on the character from where they started to where they were when I like officially was like, okay, I have to start making the book now.
Yeah, because you have maybe the temptation to go back and redraw everything, because sometimes, I guess your characters evolve, and maybe the direction you were starting with is not the same that at the end.
Yeah, that's always
frustrating. I don't know.
It's not too frustrating. I think it's a thing you have to learn, is to just sort of say it's where it was at that time. Like I could only do as well as I could in that moment. And of course, like a graphic novel takes 2 years to make and then another year to come out. So by the time it comes out, of course, I've changed. Maybe my tastes have changed. Maybe my skills have changed, but I can't go back and change the book before it comes out. You know, it's so I just have to accept that book is sort of an imprint of me at that time, the person who made it, who could make it, who did their best and tried to make something honest at that time for me. And even if I've changed since then, I just have to accept who I was.
So you're not too hard on yourself when you're looking back at your first work?
I'm pretty hard on myself, but sorry. I am pretty hard on myself, but it depends on the day. Most days I can just accept it, and some days I think, I wish I'd done that differently, but you can't. So,
was it a goal from the beginning to do books for young audiences, like mainly teenage or pre-teenage boys and girls?
I guess it just kind of happened naturally. The start was with Princesse Princesse, which I didn't actually think of as for children. I just wanted to make something funny, and most people on Tumblr were teens, and that was kind of who I was making it for. But because it was this kind of fantasy and fairy tale, and it's not too gory or adult, so it works fine for kids, and it's got the kind of I guess that's the one where I tried to have the most like gags and make it quite humorous, and then because that had already established an audience, I think I was feeling comfortable with that age range for tea dragons, but I do try to, I guess, include characters from different generations within one story. So you see different aged characters, and they all kind of interact and share and discuss ideas and learn from each other.
And I guess that's maybe a way also so people from all ages can just also see them third in the books.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
I wanted to also to know if there was some like specific rules when you're writing for young audiences.
like anything I'm keeping in mind
Yeah.
or I mean, I think the main thing is not to underestimate children or anyone really, but especially kids. It's like they I guess with my books I always try to I guess have that sense of what is said and what is shown, and have lots of pages where there's no dialogue either. So it's up for the reader to decide or see what they see, and especially in the characters as well, to see what they want to see. So I think having that ambiguity is very important for children, as well as humor and cute things and fun things, and giving them a invitation to the world. So for the tea dragons, the children, the readers are invited to think, what would my tea dragon be? You know, how would it be if I looked after one? And like, what if I had this companion for my life, or to look after, who we cherish each other, and it's like our special bond. And inviting them to, like, when I've done some workshops in the past, we've designed our own tea dragons, so everyone decides their drink and they can choose anything. It can be hot chocolate, it can be tea or whatever they want it to be.
Are there coffee dragons somewhere?
Yeah, people have made coffee dragons.
But please tell me about the origin story about the tea dragons. How was such a delicious concept came into your mind? Like, we've got dragons with leaves of tea.
I mean, it kind of was from the time when I had a lot more time to freely. I wasn't making a lot of books or like comics or anything, so I think I had more time for just ideas and brainstorming. And I just thought it was a cute idea. I'm always thinking about tea. I'm always thinking about dragons. So I think just subconsciously they came together, and I really like cute dragons. I also like characters who, I also like creatures that with that sense of companionship or lore, like the idea of lore around them that I can build and create. And so, yeah, I posted them on Tumblr and immediately got people asking, like, how do these work? What are they like? What does this dragon look like? What does this one look like? So, yeah, it had a good response. So I think I was like, oh, that's a good indication that maybe this is worth developing.
Is it time consuming, or after that you've got this kind of character designs to just build the world? You do some world building. So how do they work? How do they interact with real people?
Yeah, it takes some time. I mean, it's. I think that was almost the concept with the dragons came first, and then decided to make it as a book. So then from there, like, thought about, okay, who would be the people who are caring for them? What kind of values, or like what kind of ideas do I want to talk about with these dragons and these characters and things? And then just coming kind of naturally, like developing the whole story.
And how, especially with the thematics, because we are in a fantasy world, and you're always using a fantasy, but as a tool to speak about things that we experience in our everydays, finding your place, time passing by. How do you balance the thematics with the story?
I think, yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Really, it's just I think for me, I do start with the visual. The kind of like, say for the Moth Keeper, the visual of a person holding a lantern with moths, but like alone, was for me a really strong idea. Then that from there, the kind of questions about it, like the feelings of isolation, of being very small, of finding one's place like in the universe, and having to recognize one's own worth and one's own purpose. All those kinds of things are like things I'm always thinking about. So I guess it's like a natural it's a way of me processing my thoughts and me processing my ideas through these kind of visual like elements. And I like fantasy because then I have no restrictions.
Do you have a script when you're working on the books? How do you technically work?
Yeah, so I have quite a I'll start with the idea, the outline, and then once that's kind of, and I'll discuss that with my editors, so we are on the same page from the start rather than finding out later that, you know, something needs to change or whatever. So we sort of discuss the idea of it, maybe the audience, the purpose of the story, the kind of journey for the characters. And then once that's kind of settled, then I'll start with the script, and that might need a couple of different stages of approval or like rounds of discussion with my editors. But once the script is done, it's not that it won't change, but then that is kind of like this. I try to keep the structure of the story and not lose it too much, unless there's something I realize is like, this is not working, and then move quite steadily through thumbnails and then onto the artwork.
So, and you were saying that you're working digitally?
Yes. So up to the thumbnails. So I do the thumbnails with pencil and by hand, because I think for me that I find that helps the ideas and like become more natural. But
like how to put the characters in place, the camera angles.
Yes, yes, exactly. The speech and the each page layout, or whether they have no text, or, you know, the rhythm basically. But yeah, so far after that stage, I've done everything digitally. And
in the T-Dragon trilogy, you went from one very short story to quite the double or triple the amount of pages.
Yeah.
Is it easier to write short or long stories for you?
With T-Dragons, the first one, I was making that while I was working / studying. So, and it was a webcomic to start. So I didn't have as much time. It's kind of like, I was like, okay, I need to have like a realistic story. Like what is the shortest amount of pages that I can tell the story that I want to tell with this one and introduce the world. And I guess I kind of thought it might just be standalone, but I knew there was a lot more I wanted to say with the characters and wanted to explore with the world. So, yeah. And then as I was going on and I could spend more and more time like making the comics, I was able to imagine longer stories. And now, because I'm working on this full time, I can think a lot about more complex stories.
So if there would be a fourth installment in the T-Dragons, it would be like 300 pages.
Maybe not quite that long. It's still for children. You don't want it to be too long.
Yeah, but that's maybe also something that you're thinking about when you're doing these books, because the second and the third are more than 100 pages. So it might be quite long for, I don't know, for youngsters. Are you thinking about that?
I think 100 is still pretty good for a children's graphic novel. Yeah, it's about like normal. 200 or 300 would be quite long. Yeah, so Mothkeeper is 240 or something, so that's a little bit older.
And there's I also noted that you seem to like to do a lot of pages without dialogues also, like to have also a balance between the dialogues and the quiet scenes. Is it harder to show or to tell something without speeches?
Yes and no. I think it can be like, I don't want it to be too ambiguous, because like where someone looks at the page and is not sure at all what I'm trying to say, but I also don't want it to be so like, but I love that chance to let the reader feel it and understand it themselves. So yeah, I personally love those pages with no dialogue. That's what I like. Those pages with no dialogue are kind of what I live for. Yeah. They
let you, maybe you have more freedom also for you. You can redraw them.
Yeah. And just have the moments where nothing needs to be said. That's my ideal, is to reach a point where I can have those pages where there doesn't need to be anything.
Aren't you aiming for a total silent graphic novel?
Not quite, but it is The balance is there. Yeah, definitely. Over time, my scripts actually get shorter.
I also noticed, everyone noticed that nature is really important also in all your books, from the Sea Dragon to Aquicorn and the Moth Keeper. I don't know if that's maybe because you're living in a wild country, that maybe it has also influenced you in your everyday and that you wanted to show it in your art.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. Like all of my stories, even if they're not in New Zealand per se, are like they're all places I know and grew up visiting and have had like a personal like connection to. And so those kind of the feelings I want to portray, especially in Moth Keeper, where I directly used a lot of the landscapes and my own photos and my own drawings and stuff for the backgrounds, is that those places I wanted to communicate the feelings I have when I'm there and amongst it. And I'm really grateful that New Zealand is like home, where I can go to these wild spaces, but it still is home.
You couldn't have done Aquicorn if you were living in Paris.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess that might be true.
Be an Aquicorn in the Seine, it would be horrendous. She got struck by a bike.
Oh no, not a scooter.
Or something like that. But about these thematics, about the nature, but also the queer thematics you are putting in your books. How would you say important is it to you to speak about these themes in children's stories?
Oh, it's like so important. I wish I had more books like this when I was growing up. It would have really helped me understand some things quicker and to show an ideal way of maybe being, or not ideal, but the possibilities, just to show possibilities, I think, is something that is really important that books can do. And especially in comics, where it doesn't need to be overly stated. It's just, this is just the character. This is just the way they are. And they've got other things going on. And their other sort of thoughts and the way they're living and all that kind of thing is more important necessarily than just their identity. So I think that's the kind of work that I wish I had more of when I was young. And now, thankfully, there's a lot more being published and made.
But weren't you afraid that your work might be marginalized or even banned, for example, in the United States, or I don't know, in country, because that's something that we have seen in the last few years?
I mean, I can't stop people from doing that, but it would never stop me from making these books that I want to make and that I think should exist and that are important to me and reflect the kind of world that I want to be a citizen of, that I want to work towards creating. There's no point of making books if I'm not showing that or contributing towards that. And I hope my books are my contribution towards that kind of place.
Can we speak a little bit about the latest book, The Moth Keeper? So you had an idea of a girl with a lantern. So could you explain maybe just the origin, where you got from this idea to a full 240 pages book?
It was actually one that I came across in a sketchbook that I hadn't picked out for ages. So I was kind of trying to think like where to go next with my project, my book. And I came across this drawing in a sketchbook of a character like standing alone with the moths. And at first I thought I would do it for a very young age group, but I think just the more I thought about it, the more I thought the themes suited slightly more like coming of age, where she's taking on, like she's really having to go from childhood where she doesn't have as many responsibilities or like like going from childhood where she won't have so many responsibilities to having to really take her place in the community and decide where she wants to be and her relationships to the people around her, but also her kind of learning a lot about herself and kind of her own capabilities and boundaries. And yeah.
Is it a story because there's like as long as Anya is discovering her new job, basically she understands also that she had a lot of pressure, a lot of mental burden, I guess. Is it a way also to maybe tell your story? Because maybe when you discover the to be a professional cartoonist, it has also a lot of mental burden on you.
Yeah, it was so funny. My editor, when my editor wrote like a note about the story, like describing it, she was like, it's a story about, coming of age and fantasy and things, but it's also about burnout. And I was like, oh, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
That's what struck me at foremost. Like, I was really like, okay, she's going to do a burnout.
But I didn't consciously think of that. But burnout is something I'm like constantly struggling with. So it's just funny that it was, again, like it's kind of subconscious where these things I'm constantly thinking about, or my values and my own struggles just end up in the book. And so, yeah, it goes to what I was saying, where it's like each book is kind of an imprint of who I was at that time. And with Mothkeeper, I was feeling really burned out. So it ended up having a lot of that in it.
Did you have you took quite a change of artistic style from this book compared to the previous one? What did you change technically?
Well, the Tea Dragon style is pretty labor intensive, the way it is with the sort of almost like painting and layering and things. It took a lot of mental energy to think about how to structure the artwork on each page so that I could come and edit and change things. But that was quite a lot of extra work to do it that way. Whereas Mothkeeper is almost the most direct way that I can draw, where it's just the lines starts and then the color is just flat, basically, and just tones, colors. So I think it was wanting a more direct way to draw, and also just less labor so that I could do a longer story, because otherwise I would be stuck at that kind of page range forever.
Because you can how many pages can you draw a day when you're doing this kind of work?
With this Mothkeeper one?
Yeah.
It depends. I think around 250 is comfortable, but in the future, if I use maybe more like manga, like black and white or tones, then I can see myself being able to do more. It's just where to divide the labor.
But it's not something that maybe you wanted to do also, like just black and white pages, or just leave the coloring to another artist, because that's been done also in the industry.
Yeah. I think if there is color, I want to do it, but I would love to do black and white in future, or tones, like limited colors.
Okay, so because I don't know if are you published in Asia, for example?
I think there is a couple of Korean versions, but that's all, I think.
Okay, so you're not aiming specifically at this kind of market. I mean, you're not thinking in terms of markets, because you're just thinking about audiences.
Yeah. I don't think too much regionally. I mean, when I first made it, I definitely was not thinking about any editions. I was just making the story. So it's up to other publishers, other markets to decide if they think it'll work for them.
Your work has also been described as like comfort reading. I don't know how to say it. Like it's really warm stories. There's nothing gloomy. There's no despair, and but even though sometimes the characters are going through hard stuff, but how would you describe this kind of comfort that you put in your stories?
I think it's as you say, where the conflict and the struggle is more within the character. It's like them struggling with something particular, or their identity, or what they want to do, or their past or their future. They're kind of whereas the world around them is not necessarily as conflicting. It's kind of a place that's inviting them to grow, that's inviting them to develop and become the person that they want to be. It's waiting for them, but it's kind of, and I wanted to create that space for especially for children.
And it's kind of really rare to have this kind of. I'm not reading everything that is aiming at young adults, but it really seems to me that this kind of comics are kind of rare because you're not like giving in to the temptation of cynicism or of what we could have as far as stories are concerned because of the world we're living in. Is it hard to try to still be optimistic in your stories?
I guess it's not hard. I think it's what I can do. That's what I feel like. It's the thing that I'm able, like this is what I naturally do or want to portray. So to kind of have like a dark, heavy, like, you know, with kind of evil forces and things, for me wouldn't be natural, and it's not necessarily like, I think it's something that maybe I would explore more in other works, but just so far it just hasn't been necessary, I guess, to the story that I wanted to tell with the characters. There was always enough happening just with the characters dealing with things like grief or burnout or identity and belonging and establishing who they are. So I think there's always been enough kind of story to tell in those things. So I want the world to almost encompass them.
Okay. Has it been different for you because your books have been getting a lot of success, a lot of international press coverage? Has it changed something for you in your everyday?
I guess it makes me feel more proud of what I do, and you know, it took a long time to accept that I could do this full time. That this was my job now.
You were maybe coping with imposter syndrome.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, all the time, still am. But I think especially just coming here and seeing that, even in a completely different language, it's the same ideas that coming across. People have this like response to them, so that really helps me feel as though like I'm doing something right, managing to communicate in a way that I really want to.
You have discussions with the readers and about maybe how some books can have been important to them. You feel that you're doing something also that's important to people.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Because I mean, the rest of the time I'm just at home with my with my my like iPad and just working away. And I'm not alone. I have my partner. I have a really nice creative community, and I have the wider New Zealand comics community as well, which is very supportive and kind of small, close knit. So it's not alone, but it is in a way, because it's not directly seeing the results of what I make or anything. So it's really nice, very like affirming to come and see and meet so many people.
Okay, Kay, what does the future hold for you next? What can you say?
More of the same. I'm hoping to do more more young adult stories, so slightly older age, but very not similar themes. I think each one is going to feel so different because, again, it's like I grow and change so much between each book that I think they'll always have that hopefully have like a slightly different feeling. But I've got two more, practically speaking, I've got two more one-shot books to come from the same publisher as The Moth Keeper. So one of them is done and one of them is just about to be started. So yeah, I'm still working.
Hopefully you'll still be working for the next 10 years, and we're looking for that broody and bloody cyberpunk graphic novel we are all
that's for my retirement.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kay, for being with us and answering these questions.
Thank you so much. It was great.